what is critical thinking is the question which absolutely never ends. It's always looking for the best, let's say, definition, understanding at this moment. So if you can tell us a few words, what is the critical thinking for you now after so many years of experience and finding all these tools and processes, etc.?
So a rich conception of critical thinking, first we'll need to address the question, how do we unpack again the very term itself? So let's start there. Critical thinking, what do we mean by that term? Well, what do we mean by critical? What is the proper use here? The proper use is related to the term criteria. Criteria meaning the criteria or standards that we should be adhering to as thinkers. So now we have the first move, criteria or standards. And then what do we mean by thinking? So there are various forms of thinking. What humans mainly do in human life is reason, and that's the use here. So when we say critical thinking, we mean critical reasoning, and we mean, therefore, reasoning that adheres to appropriate standards. So then what are these criteria that are appropriate for thinking, and what is entailed in reasoning itself? Looking out at what the actual parts of thinking are from a generalist perspective, not staying within the terrain of philosophy, but looking beyond that. So the short list is the elements of reasoning include purpose, question, information, inferences, concepts, assumptions, point of view, and implications. So what's the criteria for reasoning? Now we call them intellectual standards, or we can call them critical thinking standards. And here is a short list of essential ones, and nothing could be simpler. Yeah. Make sure that your thinking is clear, accurate, relevant, deep, where you have complexities, broad, where you're facing more than one point of view, sufficient, fair, significant, logical, these justifiable. So notice again how simple this is, and how, however, these are largely missed in human life. So now we have the criteria for reasoning, standards for thinking, but then what about the critical thinking person? Well, of course, we need the virtues, intellectual virtues, such as intellectual empathy, intellectual integrity, intellectual courage, fair-mindedness. And to culminate the major theory, because I'm dealing with the core concepts here in our approach. And we think in any substantive conception of critical thinking. And that includes the tools I've talked about, as well as the understanding of the barriers to critical thinking, which we can put under the rough umbrellas of egocentric and sociocentric thinking. Now, all of these can be unpacked, but what I want you to notice is the largeness of the concepts and how much mileage you could get, or I could get, from using these fundamental concepts. And I would say that any theory of critical thinking must address assessing thinking, analyzing thinking, and improving thinking. So if somebody comes along and says, we have tools for thinking. So how are you helping us take our thinking apart to examine it? How are you helping us properly assess reasoning? And how are you helping us improve reasoning? So if your theory of critical thinking can't do that, then we need to find the one that does.
Thank you for this, because from my point of view, I was thinking that I'm dealing with critical thinking for almost 18 years of my professional work, because it was some kind of love from first sight. And I was dealing with different thinking tools, thinking processes and cultures and theories. But actually, when I got to you in terms of your books and materials, I I got the feeling impression that this is the core, this is the real
Mhm.
source of the critical thinking, but I wasn't ready yet to understand it, to fully grasp it, to fully digest it. And actually it took me another 3-4 years
Mhm.
to be ready to understand the complexity and simplicity of the materials which you created in foundation. And actually the last year when I was finishing the course in the foundation really allowed me to fully understand how amazingly simple it is. But the other hand, amazingly, there is no limit to use it. There is no aspect of life, personal life, private life, business life, educational life, that you cannot use it. It's impossible. So this is just amazing that these brilliant, simple tools exist. So the only goal for me is now just to spread the idea in Poland as much as possible, because it
Mhm.
can improve our life so much. It's just beyond our imagination how could better we live, how better decisions, solve conflicts, etc., etc. we could do from the really next day after the training, because it's so simple and so ready to use.